Like, how can exercise help prevent cancer?
Well, a lot of cancers are affected by overweight and obesity. And certainly cancer is directly related to inflammation. And overweight and obesity actually further contributes to that. So that's like stacking on the pile. Exercise helps to reduce inflammation and it helps to manage body weight. And so we see that it reduces the risks for cancer by 10 to 15%. And we know that lifestyle interventions reduce a huge amount of disease. Lifestyle can account for 80 to 90% of disease, morbidity, and mortality in this country. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Welcome to Move, Eat, Give by Interrupt Hunger. I'm here to help you get back to your roots and live like your ancestors did. Before ultra-processed foods poisoned us, and before technology trapped us in sedentary, isolated lives. I interview experts in exercise, nutrition, and food insecurity. People who have transformed their lives through healthy habits, and community health champions building healthier communities. Our goal? Bring these proven methods back to Bernie and make it the healthiest small town in Texas. Then share our blueprint to create healthy small towns all across this incredible country. Before we get to today's guest, here's how our Donate Your Weight program helps you celebrate your weight loss victories by donating $1 for every pound you lose to help fight hunger in your community. If you've ever said, I know what I need to do to lose weight, I just need to do it, then this challenge is for you. We help you turn your knowing into doing. The Interrupt Hunger 12-Week Weight Loss Challenge is a plan to help you lose weight by creating healthy habits in a fun and easy way. While you create new habits, we use compassion and community to help you stay motivated long enough for your new habits to stick. Bring the 12-Week Weight Loss Challenge to the places you live, work, and pray. Once a week, come together to exercise as a team in your neighborhood or at a local park. Then, once a month, come together to give back to your community by volunteering at a local food bank, food pantry, or soup kitchen. And finally, once a month, donate your weight to celebrate your weight loss victories. Donate at least $1 for every pound you lose to help fight hunger. 100% of proceeds benefit a food pantry in your area. You already know exercise makes you feel better. You already know the difference between healthy and unhealthy eating. And you already know it feels really good to give back. The Interrupt Hunger 12-Week Weight Loss Challenge helps you to be intentional about how you move, eat, and give, and helps you turn your knowing into doing. Visit interrupthunger.org to join as an individual or start a team. Contact us with any questions. We're always happy to chat. Hey everyone, it's Jolly here with Move, Eat, Give. Thanks for joining us today. We've got Dr. Anna Schwartz with us. Dr. Schwartz, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. This is great.
Yeah, you are quite welcome. You've been on my radar to have on the podcast for some time. We first crossed paths some years ago, and I'm excited to get to know you better. I'm going to read a bio here, and it's pretty darn impressive. It's a little longer, but she's had an incredible career. So for all our listeners, bear with us for just a second, but this is important to get all this stuff out. Dr. Anna Schwartz is a global trailblazer in exercise oncology and integrative health, whose groundbreaking research and personal triumphs as a world-class athlete and cancer survivor have redefined what's possible in cancer survivorship care. She currently serves as Chief Executive Officer of Coleman Health and Executive Director of the Strength for Living programs. Dr. Schwartz's distinguished academic career includes serving as Professor and Associate Dean of Research at Northern Arizona University and holding the prestigious Charlotte Peck Linerman Endowed Chair at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. With over 3 decades of experience, her innovative research has been continuously funded by the National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, and other major agencies, resulting in hundreds of peer-reviewed publications and 7 authored books. Her revolutionary work has fundamentally changed clinical practice standards. Literally. She's co-authored the landmark American College of Sports Medicine meeting that developed the first exercise guidelines for cancer survivors, collaborated with YMCA USA and Livestrong to create the groundbreaking Livestrong at the YMCA program, and created the award-winning Cancer Exercise app. As a member of the American College of Sports Medicine's Moving Through Cancer Task Force, she continues her mission to make exercise oncology accessible globally. Dr. Schwartz's unique perspective as both a healthcare professional and cancer survivor has shaped the Strength for Living program an elite research-proven system that fuses cutting-edge hormone optimization, precision nutrition, strategic exercise, stress mastery, and longevity science into a personalized blueprint for cancer survivors and high achievers seeking extraordinary health and performance. Dr. Schwartz is a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing, reflecting her significant contributions to nursing science and healthcare innovation. So with that, let's see here. You've helped start an entire field of medicine. Not
Yep.
many people can say that. You're a world record holder in cycling. Again, not many people can say that. You're a cancer survivor. You hold an endowed chair in research. You authored an exercise guidelines for cancer survivors, and you made a really cool app. So where did this drive come from? This passion for exercise?
Yeah, so I've always had this desire. I've had this fascination ever since I was a little kid of pushing the limits of human performance. And that got me really into exercise. But the exercise piece really came after during when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I was at the absolute lowest point in my life. And I realized that, if I'm going to die or if this is radically going to change my life, my ability to function, I've got to start doing anything, kind of the bucket list things. This was before we talked about bucket lists, and one of my dreams that I got in my head when I was a kid, probably about 9 years old, was, wouldn't it be neat to ride my bike across the United States? And so I set out to make that, try and make that a reality. And that got me into, cycling and then racing. And it really completely changed my life as much as the cancer did, I think. And so the combination of the two things at the same time, completely changed my body, my mind, and my outlook on life and what I could achieve and do.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So, what type of cancer did you have, and when did that happen?
I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was diagnosed when I was 24, and I just felt like, what am I going to do next? It's just such a devastating diagnosis when you're that age. Cancer's devastating at any age and just overwhelmingly shocking. But when you're really young, I think it really just makes you wonder about what's going to happen and what your opportunities are going to be in life.
Yeah, sure.
So became highly motivated to just live, I called it dancing on the edge. I felt like I was dancing on the edge of between life and death. And I just wanted to just grab everything and do everything I could in life.
Nothing to lose, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, pretty much everybody I've talked to that's a cancer survivor has said their life afterwards is completely different. Sometimes people fall down into this horrible hole and can't climb over, but more times than not, and I think we're seeing more and more folks. There's just so much hope out there and so much support out there for cancer survivors that it's not just about living, but it's about thriving. So, yeah,
right.
I love that.
And really finding that purpose and making a difference. And for me, for a while, it was all about cycling and setting the next world record. And then when I failed at one of my world record attempts, I really stepped back and I thought, what is really important in life and what can I do to make a difference? And that's when I got involved I decided I really want to study cancer and exercise because this is such an untapped area. Nobody had really been studying it. And I actually wanted to go and do a PhD in exercise physiology and study cancer and exercise. And I moved from Florida to Arizona to do that. And I got here and the person I was going to mentor me said, I can't support this. I don't know anything about cancer and nobody's done any research in this area. And I was like beyond devastated. I didn't know what to do. And I marched across campus and I told the nursing people, this is my situation. And they would you like to be a nurse practitioner? So I wound up becoming a nurse practitioner, which in the end has been a fantastic combination with my PhD because I've had a clinical practice and my research work. And then I wound up going to University of Utah where they were fully able to embrace what I was doing, knew it was very cutting edge. And I had just phenomenal support to pursue my research and have an amazing career.
Oh, that's cool. So, okay. So we can't just skip over the world record because you might be the first world record holder I've had on here. So tell us a little bit about that. What was the world records in?
So I've set world records at 24-hour distance in cycling, so ultra cycling. When I finished my ride across the United States, my friend Susan Nutarangelo, who is a really big name in ultra marathon cycling, said, "You're the only person I've ever met who could break my record, and I think you should go do it." And I
Wow.
just thought, this woman is crazy. Who does this? Well, of course, she'd planted the seed, and the seed started to sprout. And I thought, well, how do I train for this? And, my background in exercise physiology I was fascinated. And it was just when heart rate monitors were coming out, and I got one from Polar, and, it just really changed, technology changes training. And so I set my first 24-hour record, and I rode 418 miles. And at that same time, I was running cycling coaching and training camps in Florida and in Virginia. And we did climbing camps in Virginia. And one of the people I was training, doing one-on-one coaching with, didn't say a thing that she was trying to break my record, that her goal was to break my record. And then I opened the newspaper one day, those things we used to read, and it said, Mary Burns breaks Anna Schwartz's 24-hour record. And I was like,
What?
yeah, exactly. How rude. I mean, you should have told me and I would have supported you in it. And so then I was like pissed, and I'm like, I'm going to go break her record. But then between then, I set a 24-hour tandem cycling record with my tandem partner, Betsy King, who had done the Tour de France many times and is a really famous female cyclist. So we set a record of 435 miles, but I still wanted to break Mary Burns' record just because of the way it was done. It was just ugly. And so I, another year later, went and set that record and rode 436 and a half miles. And Betsy was like, "Man, you broke our tandem record." But I had a really good support team. So, that makes a huge difference.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible. I love cycling. So those
Yeah.
kind of distances are, yeah, that's something. Good. It takes a lot of drive to make that. Okay, so we're talking about like the early 90s, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And then when did you go to Utah?
I went to Utah in, I think it was 1993. Went up there, had a fellowship, got heavily funded with NIH, Department of Defense, Oncology Nursing Society research money, and just dove in headfirst. I was probably like the nerdiest. I was so excited to be able to do this research that I was so passionate about what I was doing. And just everything, the doors just kept opening to more and more opportunities. So it was incredibly exciting and fun time.
Well, I think you're a world-class athlete. You're an exercise physiologist. You're a nurse practitioner, so you have the clinical side. Did you and you already had the PhD when you got to Utah?
No, I went to Utah and did a PhD.
Oh, got it. Okay. So just having so many different perspectives, it was just your life was just kind of funneling into
Exactly.
exercise oncology. I mean, you
Yeah.
were kind of destined to
I,
do
I
this.
was I was definitely destined. And when I first finished nursing school, I worked in a bone marrow transplant unit, which was really cutting edge at that time. And so between that and then my own diagnosis and then starting to cycle and just pulling all these things in together. And I think having my own experience with cancer really helped me to understand symptom management when I was working with patients and then ultimately with developing exercise interventions that could be doable for people during treatment. And yeah, so it has been a blended life, but all
Yeah.
roads seem to be leading to Rome. Yeah.
So let's talk about like your first published paper in this new field of exercise oncology. What was the body of evidence like up until that
So
time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there had been one study that had been done by an exercise physiologist before I started, and she had done a really high intensity exercise program, like interval training kind of program for people when they were on treatment and found that it reduced nausea. And granted, this was in the time when we didn't have all the antiemetics that we have now that are so effective. And so that was pretty much it. There hadn't been any other studies. So I mean, I dove in head first. I did a survey of cancer survivors who responded to a little ad that I put in, or a little call for participants it was in Bicycling and Runner's World and Runner's Magazine and all these different, sports magazines. And it was amazing the people who responded. All these, celebrities, big time news anchors, and they all wrote their personal stories in there. And it was incredible. So that was one of my early papers. When I very first started doing this work, I was just a budding researcher. And my mentor said, you need to really focus on fatigue because that's the biggest problem cancer patients have. And I said, oh, well, exercise helps that. And she's like, well, nobody looked at that. We don't even have a good measure of fatigue. So I actually had to step back and develop a fatigue scale, a cancer fatigue scale. So I developed the Schwartz cancer fatigue scale, which, is now used all over the place. And it's a short 6-item measure to, look and see, do we change fatigue levels with exercise? And yes, we do. Exercise is one of the best things for fatigue.
I didn't know it was called the Schwartz. Yeah, that's cool. That's neat. Yeah, very familiar with that. Okay, so let's talk about fatigue for a minute because 90% of cancer survivors get cancer-related fatigue, and like you said, there's no medicine that works better than exercise.
Right.
Why? Yeah, just tell us why. Why is exercise so good for fatigue? Because it seems counterintuitive for a lot of people.
It's incredibly counterintuitive for patients. I've had so many patients who've just looked at me like I had two heads when I've told them you need to get up and move. And they're like, get out of here, please send somebody else in. But I think, I don't think we really understand the actual mechanism of why fatigue helps. I think there's a cellular activation. I think you could look at the cellular level and say, oh, you're activating all these different pathways, and there's probably some truth to that. But I think when you move, it helps your endorphins, it increases your serotonin, it affects you in so many different levels physiologically that you feel better. And certainly I knew from my personal experience, the more I followed medical advice, which was to rest more, the worse that I felt. And we know that when people rest a lot, they get weaker. And I think that's probably the number one mechanism is that when you go home and you rest a lot, you become debilitated. So when you get debilitated, it gets harder and harder to do things. It gets, if you sit at home for a week and then you say, oh, I've got to go grocery shopping, you're going to be exhausted grocery shopping because you haven't moved. You haven't used your muscles. You're getting weaker, physically weaker and debilitated. And so fatigue and weakness are the two most common side effects that cancer patients complain about. And it's really from going home and taking care of themselves and resting more.
So fast forward to like the first time y'all came together for the guidelines, that first roundtable. When was that? Like 2010 or was that before that?
They were published in 2010. We all got together in 2009, I guess, in St. Louis, and it was a really small group of people. We were an international group, and there were very few papers to review. I think there might have been, I don't know, 30, 40 papers to review. And when we got together, and so we didn't actually we wrote recommendations for exercise because there wasn't enough data really, although it was screamingly obvious if you were in the midst of doing the research. But, scientists were very conservative. So we made recommendations. And then spring forward 10 years later in 19, when we had a much larger group of people that we convened, Dr. Katie Schmitz led that, and we had thousands of papers to review. It's just phenomenal how in 10 years, the field just has grown exponentially and continues to grow exponentially. I just met with somebody yesterday at University of Florida her training is as a cardiovascular exercise physiologist, but she said, I've been touched by cancer so many times, I want to go into cancer. And so that's her new passion.
That's exciting. Yeah, we've had some of your colleagues on here, Katie Schmitz and Sammy Mansfield, and kind of like, yeah, there's Katie's book. I need to get your book on my shelf too. So yeah, that'd be fun. Okay, so we talked about cancer-related fatigue, and I'm just thinking. I've talked to people trying to figure out like why some people get not cancer-related, but why some people get a runner's high. And I know I feel like so much better. I definitely get the runner's high. Like it helps me just keep a clear head. My mental health suffers when I don't exercise for a long time. I had surgery earlier this year, and I couldn't exercise for a while, and I could feel my mental health suffering. It makes a lot of sense that all those chemicals, neurotransmitters and hormones and all kind of stuff that help with that runner's high, help with a lot of other things too.
Mhm.
So outside of of fatigue, weakness, what else does exercise do for to fight cancer?
Yeah. So, it definitely, so during treatment, it helps with depression, anxiety, improves your quality of life. We're seeing more and more that it improves your body composition and your bone density. Some of this stuff is like such, we're getting to know it so much. It's like a no brainer. Well, of course, and you just said all these things that it helps you. It helps you with your focus and your concentration and just having a better outlook on life. We also know that exercise really reduces your risks, not from a prevention perspective. If you're trying not to get cancer, it reduces your risks for getting cancer, which is huge. And we're now seeing some really fantastic new research that shows for cancer survivors, we want to really prevent recurrence and development of second cancers. And exercise is very strong in that department, like stronger than most medications are. So exercise really is medicine in prevention, management of tolerance of cancer treatment, and then in preventing recurrence and development of second cancers.
So let's talk about prevention the first, because like when I talk about the benefits of cancer of exercise, a lot of folks don't realize this. And it's not just for cancer, but it's for a lot of other chronic diseases that we face. But my line I usually say is you insert exercise anywhere along the cancer continuum and you have dramatic improvements. People who exercise get significantly less cancer. Cancer survivors going through active treatment have significantly fewer side effects. Cancer survivors that exercise happen to live longer than those that don't. That is not a well-known idea, because I was talking to somebody the other day, highly educated, and I was telling my own personal cancer story from 13 years ago with leukemia, and how a triathlon helped save my life and catch my diagnosis so early. And I was talking about sitting in the infusion chair for the first day, watching poison drip into your veins, the chemotherapy. And I was just, I was kind of wallowing in my self-pity, feeling really upset with myself that I let myself get in this position. And she's like, well, like you didn't actually cause yourself to have cancer.
Right.
So American Cancer Society says something like 42% of cancers can be prevented. I think it's probably much higher than that. We just don't have the research yet to back that up. But there's 18 million, I think, cancer survivors right now. So even if it's only 42%, that's a lot of
That's a
cancer
huge number. Yeah.
survivors that we could try to prevent if we changed behavior. So let's start there. Like, how can exercise help prevent cancer?
Well, a lot of cancers are affected by overweight and obesity. And certainly cancer is directly related to inflammation. And overweight and obesity actually further contributes to that. So that's like stacking on the pile. Exercise helps to reduce inflammation and it helps to manage body weight. And so we see that it reduces the risks for cancer by 10 to 15%. And we know that lifestyle interventions reduce a huge amount of disease. Lifestyle can account for 80 to 90% of disease, morbidity, and mortality in this country. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And the most important, most powerful piece of that is as exercise and being physically active to, reduce blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and cancers. So,
And you
yeah,
throw nutrition on there, of course.
exactly. And then you add nutrition on, and I think we've covered, pretty much covered the gamut. Of course,
Yeah.
stress has something to do with it too. And then when you look at the other side, when people have survived cancer and they're, they don't want to you want to reduce their risks for recurrence and development of secondary cancers. In the colorectal cancer setting, we've seen reductions of 30 to 50% in those patients who exercise. So it is really a powerful drug. I mean, if it were a drug, if we could put it in a little pill, we would change the healthscape of Americans and of the world, really.
There was just
Haven't figured out.
you mentioned colorectal. There was just a really big study that just came out, one of the most robust studies we've had.
Exactly.
Yeah, can you speak to that?
Yeah. That was done by my colleague Carrie Cornea and other colleagues around the country. And they looked at different exercise programs. And I'll probably misspeak on this because I'm not wasn't one of the the study people, but they saw in the group that exercised reductions in recurrence and improvement in survival. And they followed these people, I think it was like 7 or 10 years. It was a really remarkable study. So
Just
yeah,
adding
I
to the
mean,
body of evidence. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, this was a huge contribution. It's very hard to do these long-term studies like this with, following one person over that amount of time.
Yeah.
So
So,
it's,
so you mentioned there's so I think right now we can show that there's 13 different types of cancers that are related to obesity and overweight and sedentary behavior. Do you think it's more than that? And again, we just don't have the data to prove it
I
yet.
think we'll probably find out that it is more than that. And there's certain subtypes that are, more, there's definitely genetic, SNPs that increase your your propensity to getting cancers and environmental exposures. Absolutely. There's so many toxins in the world now, and hormone disruptors in, the plastics that we're exposed to all the time that increase our risks for cancer. So I think if we can clean up our environment and our food chain, that would further reduce a lot of people's exposure to carcinogens.
Yeah, sure. So, can you talk about what are the guidelines right now? What are the recommendations? So for cancer
Yeah, so
survivors.
the recommendations are kind of during treatment, the recommendations are at least 90 minutes of exercise per week, and ideally 2 to 3 days a week of resistance training. For cancer prevention and for cancer, long-term cancer survivors who are out of treatment, we recommend at least 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week, building up to at least 300 minutes a week, and then adding on 2 to 3 days of resistance exercise. And, most people think of exercise and they think of just doing aerobic exercise, but it's so important to do the resistance exercise. And I think we're beginning to have a better understanding of not just in the cancer arena, but for people in general, particularly with aging, that resistance exercise is really key because once you hit about 50, you are radically, at a very fast pace, you're losing muscle mass unless you're doing something proactively to maintain that. And so many people, when they do aerobic exercise, it's a good exercise, but it's not enough to maintain their muscle mass. And so lifting weights or pulling on a resistance band is incredibly important.
So, what about like from a physiological basis? I mean, we can get really nerdy, but we don't have to. Can you share just like what's going on at a cellular level, or help explain why, besides just kind of muscle wasting and saving muscle mass, but what else is going on in that resistance training helps with
So
cancer
the
prevention?
resistance training, not only builds your muscles, but it also, and I usually have a little pencil or pen and I invariably break it. But when you put force on your muscles, so like when I contract my muscles, see my little muscle there? I'm actually bending the two ends of the bone. So it's stimulating the bone to make more bone. And it's, losing bone mass happens to both men and women. And we don't talk about it as much. We don't talk about osteoporosis and bone loss in men very much, but it's a real problem for men. And then you add on like treatments for a lot of different cancers that are bone wasting, or you have a man who's got prostate cancer who now we're going to ablate his testosterone. So he's going to have really rapid bone loss. And so resistance exercise helps to maintain your bone loss and can actually build it back up. And because you're using your muscles to bend either end of your bone, basically, and stimulate them. The other way to do it is with jumping, but most adults don't really like to jump very much because we hurt as we get older. But jumping really does build your build your bone mass also.
This is amazing since like I had heard of plyometrics, but I never really dove into it until I had my
Mhm.
surgery. That was from doing, a long trail run
Uh,
early last year. So I decided at 53 and coming off significant ankle surgery, I needed to like do everything I can to get back to training and start preparing for, continue to be active into my 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, right? So the neat thing with plyometrics is there's a lot of jumping involved,
mhm.
and it's it's pretty fascinating. Not just for speed, but gosh, just Yeah, just talk about that a little bit more, would you?
Yeah, plyometrics is really, it's one of those exercises that kind of gets everything all at once. It gets your heart rate up, so you're getting a good aerobic workout. You're working on your explosive power because you're jumping, and then you're getting that landing that's really helping to build your bones. And it takes a lot of strength. You really build your strength when you're jumping around like that. Um, and that's
And
how
it's
your
fun.
power gets built.
And it's
Yeah,
fun.
and it's fun. It's like being a kiddie.
So you can't just start jumping or plyometrics or doing long distance. So cancer hits folks of that are all across the exercise spectrum. Some people that haven't exercised in 30 years, and then some are world-class athletes get cancer sometime. Right now, I tell folks that like one of my missions in life is to ensure every single cancer survivor is referred to an exercise specialist as part of their individual cancer survivorship plan. The problem is our health system hasn't caught up with that goal. We're getting closer, but we still have a long way to go. If somebody is seeing an oncologist, maybe they're in the rural setting, or maybe they're just oncologist doesn't have the resources or knowledge yet. How do we bridge that gap, that knowledge gap?
That's what we're really working on right now is trying to. Katie Schmitz and Anna Campbell and I just published a book called Essentials of Exercise Oncology, which is the first textbook for undergraduate students to really start getting the next generation educated as they come out of college. But that's, your goal is my goal is to try and get every cancer survivor to an exercise program or into exercise rehabilitation. And this changing the whole paradigm across the medical system is really a challenge because physicians are like, I'm too busy. And then you've got like medical assistants who bring patients into the clinic who don't really have the educational background. So, figuring out how to insert that and create the easy buttons so that it's very easy for someone to get referred into exercise oncology programs. One of the things we've done with the Moving Through Cancer Task Force, which is an initiative of the American College of Sports Medicine, is we've put together a list of all worldwide list of all the different exercise and cancer programs that are available in all the cancer exercise specialists so that that's readily available. All people have to do is go to the Moving Through Cancer website and they can find the whole registry of people. And it's not just people, it's also virtual programs, and like my cancer and exercise app is on there. But it takes a village and a lot of voices to really change patterns of care and to get people into the programs that they need to and really get triaged into the right one, because some people don't need a physical therapist. They just need to know how to exercise properly and what they can do and need some guidance, from a trainer.
And just have
And then
somebody
some people
tell
are
them it's
able
okay.
to, yeah, exactly. And then some people are able to use, just pick up like my cancer and exercise app, which is tailored to each individual user by the type of treatment they're getting, their type of cancer, and it follows the ACSM guidelines. So it just, it's very individual for different people, which makes it a little more complicated too, because everyone needs a different prescription. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah, so let's focus on the patient here and your app, because I've actually taken time to go through your app, and it's really easy. You created a neat app, and then after that, let's talk about the healthcare provider, the APP, like PA/nurse practitioner or an oncologist. So let's focus on an individual patient right now, because odds are they aren't talking to an oncologist at a cancer center that has an exercise physiologist on
Right,
site. We're getting
right.
more, but odds are they're not. So you created this really neat app. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I created the app because I saw exactly this problem. People don't have access to cancer and exercise programs and they don't know what to do. I mean, I would always tell patients, you need to do this, this, and this, but they would say, you're the first person who's ever told me what to do. And I know this is a problem everywhere, and I know that most places don't have exercise programs for patients. So I created the app based on all of this, all of these thousands of data points that I had, and created algorithms based on someone's level of fitness, their fatigue. It adapts every day to the user. So if you have a lot of fatigue today, you'll have a lower exercise prescription than if you feel better tomorrow. And the prescription is really individualized based on what your baseline, how you perform on the baseline tests. And so it begins to ramp up over time using exercise physiology principles. So some weeks it's harder, some weeks it's easier to try and, bring you up to the best that you can be over time.
So
And
it's just, go ahead. No.
I was
Tell
going
your
to say a
story.
funny story about this was when I was developing it. The app developer or programmer is a pretty fine triathlete. And he said, "Oh, you've got 2 programs here." And I said, "No, really, I have really an infinite program here. And you have to figure out how to program this." And then once he did it, he started testing it and he said, "Hey, this even works for me at my, as an elite athlete." And I said, that's what I wanted. I want something that would take somebody from being bedridden and get them stronger, but also be helpful for a young guy who's super fit and trying to maintain their fitness. Yeah.
So even before someone goes to your app, should they talk to their provider, make sure there's no limitations they need to be aware of?
That's a real struggle. I think for the vast majority of people, they can exercise. We all walk every day, don't we?
Yeah.
So why would I ever tell someone not to walk? And the biggest problem in our country right now, and probably worldwide, is inactivity. So why would I put up that barrier? I want people to pick up that app and be able to go. And if they can't walk very far in the 6-minute walk that the app starts with, it's going to totally titrate the exercise program down.
I think that's important. It doesn't matter, again, if it's been 30 years and you're a novice and beginner and have no experience and you're out of shape, it doesn't matter. Or if you're, an elite level endurance racer, like
Right.
it adjusts for you.
It adjusts. Yeah. So it gives you, and there's a whole library in there of how to do the different resistance exercises. So if you've never done them before, you'll know how to do them. And it gives you, it starts you off at a very basic level.
So it sounds really expensive.
Pardon me?
I said, your app sounds really expensive.
It was really expensive to develop it.
No. I mean to use for the
No,
user.
actually right now it's free.
Yeah. I was setting you up.
Yeah. Yeah. I really want people to use it. And right now it's being used by people all over the world, which just blows my mind. I'll get emails from people, all over the place and researchers in different countries that want to use it or tweak it in different ways.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping.
It really is easy to use.
Yeah,
So
that was my goal, because most people, so many cancer survivors are older and they may not be comfortable with using apps, and I wanted it to be really easy to read if they had a hard time visually or whatever.
Yep. So let's turn to the providers.
Mhm.
So PAs, NPs, MDs, DOs, they're very hesitant about initiating this discussion with patients, because I've had oncologists tell me, like, of course I know my patient should be exercising. Of course I know it's good for them. But as soon as I tell them that they should be exercising, you know what the first question is going to be?
What do I have to do?
What do I do? And I don't know what to tell them, and I don't have time. So I do, before I let you get started here, use the term easy button. And that's what I use with folks all the time. Like, we don't expect our providers to know everything there is to know about radiation or everything there is to know about surgery or nutrition. That's why you hit the easy button and refer it out.
Right.
That's all you got to do. You just got to have a plan in place. So talk to us about providers. How do we bring providers up to speed and get them comfortable?
Yeah, so I think, well, a lot of the stuff that we've done through the ACSM is to develop, like tear sheets that they can give. Is either there's one version where they can give it as a prescription and write in, just check the boxes of, lift 2 days a week and walk for, work up to walking 300 minutes. That seems like incredibly easy because, we're used to writing, prescriptions and things. There's also just like informational sheets that they could have in their clinic for patients. And then certainly, knowing about the registry and then becoming familiar with people in their community who can be that resource and that referral. I think once a clinician makes a connection in the community with somebody who has some cancer and exercise knowledge, they can use that that person to refer to and say, hey, you need to go see Jelly, you need to go see, so-and-so and get your cancer exercise fix.
So really, providers do this all the time with resources in the community. They're always networking,
Right.
trying to figure out who to send a patient to for this or that. That's really how easy it is, right? It takes a little time up front, but you just have to reach out and
Exactly.
try to network.
You know, women with breast cancer, they're at risk for getting lymphedema, which is when their arm gets swollen. And we refer people to lymphedema specialists all the time. I mean, that's just standard of care. And if you don't attend to their swollen arm, then that's, you're not practicing very well. And so you refer to a PT or an OT, somebody who specializes in that can help the patient manage that, because I don't have time in clinic to go through everything. It's not my expertise. So I refer them out. So we just need to get the volume of educated trainers and physical therapists and OTs in the community so that they can lead the charge, and so that there are more programs to refer people to, or individual providers that can help patients with that.
Yeah, so not everyone has access to a YMCA, but you helped create Live
Mhm.
Strong at the YMCA.
Right.
I don't know if it's free, but it's very low cost.
It's very low cost, and they do a lot of scholarships. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But and there's of resources for exercise physiologists, exercise specialists, even trainers to go out and get
Yeah.
certified, right?
There are lots of educational programs, and Anna Campbell just completely changed and upgraded the American College of Sports Medicine certification. So it's very doable. It takes time. You have to have a lot of, there's a lot of modules, but cancer is a complicated disease, and it's not one disease. There's so many intricacies and then so many different effects of cancer treatment. So a trainer really needs to have a pretty good knowledge base, but that program provides all of that.
Even if you're in a very rural setting, if there's an oncologist or somebody that's motivated allied health professional in a cancer center, like it just seems you just need a spark. You need to reach out to somebody a local physical therapy or something. And even if they're not trained, like the two of y'all working together to improve your knowledge
Exactly.
could be a very powerful team
It's
to
it's
help an entire
hugely
community.
it's hugely powerful. And even in a really rural area, there needs to be at least somebody who has that knowledge. And I think we're really focusing on workforce development. I think in 5 years, it's going to be a very different conversation, because there'll be a lot more people out there with interest and understanding and the clinical knowledge of how to get people into a safe exercise program.
So putting your ask you to put your nurse practitioner hat on for a second. Nurse practitioners and PAs, APPs seem best suited to kind of own this so far for a
I
cancer
think we
center.
do a little, we tend to spend a little more time educating the patients and really pushing them into more of the lifestyle changes that will make a difference for them. Again, it's a huge, when you think of what these people come out of school with, their background is really poorly developed, shall I say. And with exercise, I mean, nurses don't come out of nursing school or nurse practitioner training or PA training with a strong background in exercise, whether it's for rehab of cancer or cardiovascular disease or arthritis or any of that. And I personally think there needs to be a whole module at the advanced practitioner level about exercise and chronic disease, because it's so critical. There should actually be exercise for disease prevention and chronic disease, but that's the disease prevention thing. We just keep pushing that out, even though we have so much knowledge about disease prevention, and we don't seem to value that. We only value the treating the problem. We don't want to see you until you have a problem,
Yeah.
which is just backwards.
It's completely backwards. I think we'll get it fixed. It's going to take a little bit. I think I've got one more question before I put it back over to you. So let's talk about prehab for a second. So we've learned a lot about prehabilitation. So rehab afterwards, and prehab is actually before you start treatment. So somebody gets diagnosed. Sometimes it's critical. You have to get started with treatment right away, whether that's a medicine or a radiation or surgery. But sometimes you do have a little bit of time, even if it's only 3 weeks. Can you talk about the benefits of prehab
Yeah,
going into
prehab
a
is
treatment?
incredibly important, even in 3 weeks. You think of somebody, we've really seen this in the lung cancer setting where prehab is you get diagnosed with lung cancer and you're not very functional. Your lungs aren't functioning very well, and a lot of them are pretty debilitated. And you get them to exercise and they get stronger before they go to surgery. And so they're going to do better post surgery. They're going to tolerate the chemo better. Their outcomes are going to be better. And this is true for anyone with cancer. If you can if you're not an exerciser and then you get diagnosed, if you can get launched into that, by God, I'm going to be as strong as I can before I start all this treatment, it's going to make a big difference. And then if you can maintain it throughout, it makes a huge difference. I think about like knee replacement surgery. And if you can do really intense leg strengthening exercise before a knee replacement or a hip replacement, your recovery and your outcomes are going to be so much your recovery is going to be so much faster and your outcomes are going to be better. And it's the same with cancer. I mean, you're going to tolerate, we know that when you exercise during treatment, certainly if you start exercising before you have to go to surgery, you have a better tolerance for treatment. You're more likely to get the full dose of chemo.
I was going to
And
point that out. Yeah, that's
yeah,
a
and
huge thing. Yeah.
it's huge. You say, well, so what if I get the full dose? Well, so what? That means you're much more likely to reach that cure. And so it means a lot.
I remember, so this is old fashioned chemotherapy when I got it back in 2012. But the full dose was 6 cycles of bendamustine Rituxan. Doesn't really matter what it is. There's countless meds out there now, but like the full cycle was, or the full regimen was 6 cycles every 28 days. But I remember my oncologist saying, the average was only about 3 of those cycles because
Wow.
it was so harsh.
Right.
I think this becomes even more important. It's important to everybody, but even more important for our older patients because those are the ones that have the problems tolerating medications even more so. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
very definitely.
yeah.
And
So, go
it's
ahead.
hard to get old people to exercise when they've never exercised in their life. Really hard to move the needle.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm always saying. Some movement is more important than none. And just getting up off at the couch and walking around the dining room table can help you. So,
I get such a smile on my face. I'm starting to see more and more examples of folks in their 80s doing, sprinting and
mhm.
weightlifting. Oh my gosh, I don't remember her name. I follow her on Instagram. She's in her early 80s. I don't know if she's 83 or 84, but I don't think she started lifting until she was 63. And now
Wow,
she's like world record holder and winning all these
that's cool.
contests because like, she's the oldest one out there, but she's
Yeah,
still like doing the Olympic lifts and I mean knocking it out in her early
that's
80s.
awesome.
So it is literally never too late
It's
to
never
start.
too late. Our bodies are meant to move, and it's the most important thing you can do for yourself. Yeah.
That's a pretty fantastic place to stop. So let me ask you is we covered a lot today and I
Mhm.
feel like I could have kept talking to you for a while. Is there anything else you want to share with folks?
I think it's just the most important thing you can do, whether you don't have cancer and you want to prevent it, or whether you're a cancer survivor or a person living with cancer. Movement is medicine. It's the most important thing you can do. It really is.
I love that. So you mentioned Moving Through Cancer, American College of Sports Medicine. What's the name of your app again?
My app is Cancer Exercise. My book is Cancer Fitness. It was
Okay.
written in 2004, but it's as relevant now as it was then. Nothing is, we have a lot more data now than when I wrote that book, but everything in the book is still pretty relevant.
Very
Yeah,
good.
and then I have a program called Strength for Living for cancer survivors and for people who are really interested in optimizing their health.
All right. So I did think of one more question, but what's the best way to follow you or get a hold of you?
I'm Dr. Anna L. Schwartz, at Dr. Anna L. Schwartz. I have a practice page that's Dr. Anna L. Schwartz, www.drannalschwartz, or the Cancer Exercise app, which has information about the app and also another email for me.
I gotcha. So the last question I just thought of, like, what do we still need? What are we still lacking in cancer research?
But there's still a lot that we have to learn. We have to really understand like the cellular mechanisms of things because, we always want to know. Um, And if we can understand the cellular mechanism of things, the mechanisms are everything. If you can understand the mechanisms, you understand why you can really focus interventions better. We need to have insurance reimbursement. We're working on trying to get Medicare coverage right now. That's going to be a very long, drawn out process. But that's key to get people, cancer survivors healthy again and strong and functional. So it's really, really important. And so many people do need the specialized care of a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. That's, a step above what an exercise trainer can do. And we need to build this workforce so that we've got the volume of people across the United States and around the world who can help cancer survivors regain their vitality and their zest for life.
Yeah. I fully believe that we'll get there. I don't know if it's going to be, 10 years. I think we'll make great strides just in the next 5 years, but we'll get
This
there.
field is growing so fast, just exploding. So I think we're going to see changes really quickly.
Yeah.
It's such an exciting time.
It is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
This has been a lot of fun. So, with that, Dr. Schwartz. All right.
Great.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Please rate and review the podcast on the platform of your choice so we can reach more people and more people are recommended this podcast. And if you really liked it, the single best way you can help us grow is by telling your friends. Now, for all the legal stuff. The views and opinion expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. For my day job, I'm an employee of AbbVie and appear on this podcast on my own accord and not in the professional capacity as an AbbVie employee. All viewpoints provided are my personal opinions and not intended to reflect those of my employer. If you have any questions or comments, please shoot me an email at jolly@interrupthunger.org. Let's go spread some joy, people.